Jayaram podcast.
So we are recording this session. We will also be publishing this out. So you can watch this again or pass it on to other folks in your organization. Um, Today we'll be talking about, creating a resilient data analytic strategy for your organization. Now you might ask why another strategy and how do you go about doing it? What is even the business case to approach it that way? So different folks, based on my little bit of research, who are on the call are on different levels of continuum from a data and analytics standpoint. So we'll try to kind of address the envelope business case, and subsequent webinars will go deeper into specifics. So keeping in mind the goal there, a quick introduction. That's me speaking. That's my full name, Nandagopal Jayaram. My user-friendly name is Nan. I'm President and CEO, CoStrategix. Background, 25 years or so in enterprise architecture. Uh, a technology geek, happen to learn quite a bit of business management and sales and marketing. Um, that's a little bit about myself. And I also have a co-presenter. His name is Ram Kishan. His user-friendly name is Ramki. He is the director of technology, and he also leads the data science practice. About 19 years of software architecture experience, and he has more interest than I do in badminton and traveling apart from technology side of things. Going on, right, a quick overview of CoStrategix. We've been around since 2006. We deliver digital experiences powered by data insights. Team of about 100 people. Today, digital is emerging as a need for almost all sizes of organizations, and we bill ourselves as a digital partner. We work with even large companies such as P&G, Kroger, Verizon, and also upper mid-market companies, which is our primary target at this point. Our practices are digital, is crafting digital strategies. Digital commerce is big, data science, which is where this webinar is centered around. We do quite a bit of app modernization, taking applications and infusing them with artificial intelligence insights, user experiences that are better and more modern. We do all this on cloud. We do quite a bit of mobile apps as well. Today, when you see, right, the data analytics world, there's a lot of jargon being thrown around. It's pretty noisy, as you would expect any area of technology would be. Scorecards, reporting, Tableau, Power BI. I need my KPIs. Can you create a dashboard that I can project on a TV screen? What about artificial intelligence? Hey, we should get into AI so we can appear good to our customers and win RFIs or RFPs, bids and sales opportunities. So there's a lot of things happening around data, right? So these are some of the things you might have heard from your CEOs or your customers or partners as well. So if you keep this type of a landscape in mind, right, how do you then make sense of all of those things that's happening and what's going to happen, and kind of craft a resilient strategy that can last for a while, right? So that's kind of the agenda for today. We're hoping that you'll, the takeaways from this webinar will be a formal approach to your data and analytics strategy. We'll start by understanding some of the macro business and economic, technology drivers, and some major conceptual thought frameworks. And how do you go about developing some of the components of your data analytics strategy? What are some of the challenges? And a quick perspective on a modern data analytics footprint, and a couple of case studies if we have time, and then go into questions and answers. So starting with macro business technology drivers, the landscape is changing. IT was supporting role, right? Having systems and processes to support the operations of the business. But today, technology is becoming more centric. It is changing business models. IT is not a supporting function, but rather the I and the T is separating out, right? Technology is being consumed across all of the functions in the organization. For example, vision used to be technology centric from an IT standpoint. Right now, it is more customer or information centric. Strategy, did not necessarily have IT participation. IT would be considered a cost center, not necessarily something that produced revenues. But today, it is central to the business model. Infrastructure, right, was all like islands of systems and servers and data centers, and it was essentially a collection of assets or software, right, that you would run to operate. So more or so, they would be like your pets, like your dog or cat at home, right? One-off, high touch, and lot of attention to it. Today, it is going more towards collection and connection, right? So the islands are all being interconnected through cloud type of fabric, and more of an approach to a cattle, like it's a set of things, and the type of attention you give is at mass, and there's a higher degree of scale. So it's kind of gravitating towards that piece. It used to be governance would be around truth. What you saw is what it was. But today, given the complexity of systems and the data, the governance model is evolving more towards a trust-based model. Same with organizations. It was all a monolithic IT organization. Now distributed functions, right? Like marketing is a big purchaser of technology. Operations is buying its own technology and visualization and type of things. So IT is not a central buyer anymore today. Roles were all very tech, but inside of a data, right, there is data scientists, data engineers, there's high degree of tech skill set that is, a wide spectrum of skills that are becoming more important. Finally, metrics was around low risk, high uptime, lockdown and don't change things. Whereas now it's all about business drivers, new revenue streams, continuous change, fail fast, that type of thing. So given all of these landscape changes, right? Gartner says right about 20 to 90% of organizations will have some form of data analytics driving their core business models. We're seeing a great number of our customers having a rock or a priority that they have defined for 2019 to have some degree of data analytics, whether it be visualization, scorecards. Some are even exploring few machine learning models and some predictive models as well. So driving data literacy in the organization is critical today, and a lot of leaders recognize that there is some form of conversations happening in all of the C-suite that we see today. So there is quite a bit of things. So if you look at that, right, understanding that there are a major shifts occurring in the landscape, and there is some impetus for going the data and analytics way. Here are some major conceptual and thought frameworks. Let's look at a few types of analytics, types of users, and so on, right? So there is different types of analytics. This is a slide you may have seen, some of you in the data space. There are different types of reports or analytics you can pursue. Descriptive is the most common one, and descriptive is basically what tells you about what happened, right? It's kind of your rear view mirror in your car. You look at it, you see things passing by. You can't do much about it. You can't dodge, it's all things in the past, but you can learn from it and steer better into the future. But to that, right, the amount of human effort you have to supplement to turn it into a decision and an action is quite a bit. That's represented by the distance between this arrow to the decision. Now, furthermore, you go down, diagnostic is a level of maturity more than descriptive, but diagnostic will also tell you why something happened, right? So the amount of effort you have to put to make a decision and action is somewhat less. It's a little more intelligent report, if you will. Further down, based on data and sources, right, you can go even more, wow, it's what's going to happen, right? Am I going to see a spike in the number of orders I'm going to get because of a weather change, right? And I can take weather patterns, which is changing a lot today, but basically take that and make some predictions and say, hey, what's going to happen? The amount of input there is less, but you mostly are qualifying, what type of actions should I take, and uh, making a business case out of that. Prescriptive, right, is what should I do? So you might be driving down to the airport and your phone says that, hey, I rescheduled your flight that you're about to take to a later flight, and you have no idea why, but it's able to actually perceive that there's going to be a traffic increase in the amount of driving you have to do. You're not going to make your current reservation on that plane, and so it's automatically booked you to another plane, right? So that type of prescriptive systems, we don't see much of these today. It's on the order of complexity much higher. But that's kind of where the continuum will take you, is basically the decision point is also made within the system. Not only can it predict, but it also tells you what it should do. So that basically leads to decisions and actions with very little of human effort. It's almost automated. And you can see some of that on your Google phones or iOS phones coming to life. So if you're looking at what type of analytics are, this is the continuum of like the analytics program. You've got data, you generate insights, and you take action. Pretty simple there. But as you have data, you have to acquire data from multitude of sources. And before you do that, you almost have to have an inventory of data within your enterprise. Now that inventory of data itself, right, is not a simple thing. What data is visible to you is easy, but there is data assets not so visible. Like, for example, though, from an internal data standpoint, that could be time tracker data, pretty easily visible. But what about card key in, check-in, checkouts? That's not visible and may not be within your consideration, but that's also a significant data asset. Or if you have a trucking fleet, there may be GPS data of where each truck is at any point in time. So those are some of the things that you have to consider and build out your inventory of data sources. And then as you bring those things together, right, the data is all in different shapes and formats and units, and they're not all normalized or what we call harmonized, right? So you have to bring the data together and apply a sequence of transformations and substitutions and store it in a certain way that is friendly enough for anybody to understand, analyze. Third step is you have to analyze the data itself. And there is a whole degree of a spectrum of the analysis types you can apply. We talked about the descriptive, diagnostic, prescriptive, predictive type analysis. Once you do that, then you also have to deliver those insights. Now, delivery could happen in an email, let's say, or within an application, a business application, mobile apps, or a push message on your phone, different ways to deliver data, because delivery of data is what makes it actionable. And if you can't deliver it in time, it may go stale, and you may not be able to put it to good use. Now, if you look at the types of users, right? So we are essentially looking at types of analytics, how you go about it, and who are the types of users you have to keep in mind within the organization. There's a different set of users with different levels of analytical complexity. This is a Gartner slide. Basically, it shows managers, executives are at the broad base of this user pyramid. Business analysts slightly more analytical and specific in the type of analysis that they seek. Power users, data scientists, far few in number today, but are going to apply and generate some predictive models. They're not only going to consume this data, but they are going to generate some insights, right? So they produce information that affect top line or profitability directly. So those are like different, users and their needs. That is something to keep in mind as well. And so finally, like as you go about, right, this is another concept is the data or the type of data you collect should address all of these known questions and unknown questions in the future. So today when I'm designing a system, I know we have to answer a certain set of questions and they're easy, right? You can bring that type of data, build a report, and then basically deliver that. And what about questions that might show up in future, right? What about data that you know you have today, but you don't know that you're going to obtain a set of data? So your systems and processes should scale across. When you have unknown data, but a known question, you're kind of rationalizing and figuring out how to address that and basically establishing value at that standpoint. But if you have both unknowns, that's an opportunity for innovation and exploring, right? Can I put a mobile app in the hands of my employees, right, or my partners or my consumers, and can I collect a lot of data around it, right? GPS and tracking and the usage, a lot of those type of data. So once you open up that type of data, the type of questions you'll be able to answer or the value that you'll be able to realize is a whole lot different than what you might be getting out of your foundational core systems. So that is kind of a set of dimensions to also keep in mind. This illustrates what you do today and what you should be focused for years from now. So final construct is, you could be at different places inside of your company. A lot of companies just use Excel spreadsheets. And maybe there's Access database. Somebody would have written a small VB front end to get some data. Or there may be different systems. Somebody is able to go pull reports and make sense out of that and assemble some spreadsheet and send it to the C-suite or different organizations looking for that type of data. Or you might also have a BI type system where you're bringing all of this, a data warehouse, bringing all of the data into a central system, and then basically, running reports and cubes. And as the continuum goes, right, it goes into more predictive and prescriptive. Those are different levels of continuity. So if you basically see where you are, the strategy that you frame will take you through these levels of maturity. So we looked at a few major conceptual and thought frameworks, right? But the type of users, the type of analytics, and the different continuum of the analytic stages. Let's take a quick look at developing the components of your data analytics strategy. So like we said, these are the 6 components. You ought to have a vision, and we'll go through some of the examples in subsequent slides. And that vision is not necessarily about, we have to drive top line sales by X%. It's about why, right? And why is more impacting, and it connects more emotionally with rest of stakeholders in your organization. And basically, a strategy is identifying one or two or three things that bring it down to an implementation sort of a blueprint. You're taking analytics need from different departments or different stakeholders, refining it, clarifying it, and bringing it down to a point where you can make a business case about that piece. So you're really making a choice of all the things you could be doing. What are one or two or three things you will do, and what are things you won't do at this point in time? And then basically against those, you would build a set of metrics. What's the governance model? How you go about doing that, and talent and processes, like what type of talent do you need, and what are the different processes that you need to have in place to develop um, that type of a data analytics program. Once you do all of that, you need a data architecture that is also pretty scalable, so that engineering doesn't actually constrain you from where you need to go to future places. As you bring all of these things together, think of it as essentially a document, if you will, where you're capturing a lot of these things, and that becomes the guiding set of rules as you go implement the program within your own organizations. We will be sharing multiple webinars on this area. We'll go deeper and probably even engineer or build a strategy document in real time on a subsequent program here. But those are essentially the six pieces that we put together for our customers anytime they come to us for defining these strategies. So let's say, what are the things that one should be careful about as you go about, defining some of these strategies? So let's look at a few different challenges here. We talked about the vision itself, right? The defining a meaningful why. You need to define a vision or mission for data analytics program. We talked about that. It needs to be a guiding statement, not necessarily top line or bottom line centric, but the difference it will make to your customers, employees, partners, or communities, right? An example below here is provide stakeholders in our organization with quality data reliably and rapidly to drive their business needs. So, and a good example there is, how data governance or IT actually making data available is much similar to a utility company. For example, your electric company in your cities, making that available to buildings. So if you want to go put a 20-story building, you would submit a request that you need this type of power requirements, and they would immediately make that utility available to you, right? The water, plumbing, and all of that is made available to a property developer within a city without too much of friction. That's a good metaphor, right? For an IT to function the same way inside an organization, they take care of data. Data is utility at the end of the day. IT is the governing body of that, but they need to be able to make data available to marketing, to operations, and different other functions while controlling the quality of data, security, and so many other factors. But they should be able to make that data be available with very less friction, very rapidly inside the company. So if you take that type of a construct, this would be how a vision could be crafted, right? Or if you are a healthcare company, how can we create data-driven healthy outcomes for our patient customers? That could be another dimension to creating your why as well. So if you go to the second challenge, right, it's about securing resources and funding. Not only do you have to identify a business case, you have to document and narrow it down and connect it to certain outcomes, right? You show the approach that you're going to take, and also don't necessarily talk in general terms about, we'll put a BI tool together, we can visualize data this particular way, and this is how it's going to help, but rather what you can commit to, right? You can craft it very narrowly and connect it to business outcomes and commit to a certain outcome, right? And so thereby you're becoming a champion of not necessarily a program implementation, but business outcomes by adoption of data analytics within the organization. If you can actually showcase how you're going to take it full circle, create that data literacy, and have people actually use that in their day-to-day decision making, now you're at a different level of continuum rather than just treating it as a project to implement a BI platform. Some of the ideas is you can start by creating an inventory of business needs. We had a question, how do you go about doing some of that, right? That would be, maybe there's existing questions that come to you. There are your industry meetups. We can help as well, is basically create an inventory of that and start prioritizing some of them. Clarify and build them into a presentable business case. Basically, different types of analysis. This is where you tie a particular business case to the outcome, whether it be operational efficiency or untapped revenues or a new revenue stream. All of those things could fit the bill here. So going to the third challenge, right, you have to identify and set some meaningful scope. Because this is so broad, you could easily get framed for something much larger from an outcome standpoint that you can't necessarily influence. So keeping it lean, keeping it agile, more minimum viable product, thinking in those terms, being realistic in setting expectations. That's kind of one of the ways to do this, and keep the plan to a short time spans, right? So basically, a lot of times when we work with customers, what we are doing is salvaging a business or a BI program that somebody else has built because it's taken too long. We don't like the reports, we don't like the way the graph shows. Those are the type of complaints we get. Really, they're all at a very shrink wrap level, right? It's because they've never gotten to the core of the initiative to realize that business value. So for example, you kind of take a very agile approach. You take a couple of systems which has important data, you build a business case, and you keep this whole iterations, right? Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, 3 iterations of 2 weeks each. You ought to see business value at the end of that. If you can show that first time around, and then in every 2 week increments, if you can keep putting out a degree of reports or business value to the end users, you've now established a good cadence of value delivery to your business. So by doing so, you're not having to operate and manage huge expectations. You can actually deliver in short increments and keep the business happy. And also the return on investment is also more frequent and not so far in between. So if you go to the next challenge, right, which is the last one, I think, is creating data engagement. Say you do all of these things, people will not consume data because, first of all, they'll not see how these reports are coming to life. The truth model, right, is not necessarily visible to them from that standpoint. They have to trust the data. For that, you have to establish how the quality is there, where your sources of data is. That's one aspect of it. Second, they may just not be data driven. I do my work this way. I know how this works. It's all based on gut feel. I know this business. But as opposed to being more data driven, right? So that is another challenge we see with our customers is we can go build these nice systems and very insightful reports, but nobody is there to actually consume them and make decisions. So you have to start somewhere small. You have to demonstrate value, identify data champions who can actually help you amplify this notion of data-driven mindset inside of your organizations. So we tend to find them fairly easily, and 10 to 15-minute conversation with somebody, and they're all excited. "Oh, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you write a quick model for that?" Those essentially represent your champions, right? There may be more formal ways of identifying them, but basically that's very key to creating data literacy and engagement inside of the organization. So what we've seen so far, right, is essentially a few challenges. So few macro drivers, few conceptual thoughts, bringing it all together inside of a data analytic strategy, and some of the challenges. Now, if you go define all of this, let's take a quick look at what a modern data analytics um, footprint might look like. Before I go to that, I also want to remind you quickly, if there are any questions, right? I see a few of these showing up here. Got some in my emails as well from different folks. So I'll be addressing some of them, but you can type it in into the interface. Going to this, so this is one of the modern analytics footprint, right, that we have fairly codified as a stack or as a solution or accelerator, and we take these to multiple customers on a short order, right, of effort. So basically, we call this a smart data platform. It includes concepts as BI. It includes data lakes and those type of concepts, but it doesn't necessarily constrain one way or the other with those concepts. It is extensible. It is loosely coupled, and it can grow with different needs of your organization. So it can tap into different operational systems, different data sources, marketing, third-party systems, spreadsheets, and you bring it all into a certain data acquisition platform. We use different technologies for this. A lot of it is open source, Cloudera based, sometimes Kafka, those type of things, and into a big data store, right? Different databases that make sense for the type of data that's being brought in, but also has a data management user interface where you can literally go set some governance rules, right? So operations need some employee identifiers to map against time entry data, but they cannot have access to the salary data and any of the personally identifiable information like social security numbers and so on. You can go set those rules through the interface and essentially create a node, a delivery node to operations, and have them consume that data, right? But you got central control of what they get to see, but they've got flexibility of how they use the data, and they can go hire a couple of their own modelers or data scientists, if you will, and attach them to that data source to do some work. So this can go and scale to an organization as large as that, where different departments are hiring their own analysts, or one or two member IT staff as well. The footprint is fairly manageable. It's usually on the cloud. And then there are a lot of data models as well that we build into these things, which is a model can be a simple linear regression model or more predictive type where you can train those models, both supervised, unsupervised, that type of thing. So that take you into more of a predictive and prescriptive type of analytics we talked about. This can scale, but even to descriptive and diagnostic type reports, you can write some of the data services and push them into Tableau, Power BI, any of those type of visualization tools. But you see, most people start here, right? And they kind of back into a database that's usually a SQL database server. So this basically brings a more smart data approach to this piece. This is where a visualization tool usually sits. And that goes in as, data dashboards, and leadership uh, can consume that, and different stakeholders in the company can also consume that. So that's a modern data analyst footprint, right? Now, not every organization needs a complexity like that, but basically, that's something we can customize and build it once and have companies operate it themselves. While some companies like us could be helping out in a support type of a model as well. So, but essentially having a footprint like that doesn't constrain you towards the future, because in future, most of the businesses are going to go digital, where technology will be central to whatever it is that they do today. An example would be Domino's, right? They build themselves as a technology company in the business of pizza. So they have literally inverted that whole notion of where technology is. They're technology centric companies doing other things, producing other things in the marketplace. That is going to become a norm. And so a data analytics footprint like that will support that notion and help the company, keep innovating and evolving into the future. Let's take a couple of case studies. I think we've got about 4 minutes, and it's a very simple case study. A private equity that invests in senior living properties. Each property is pretty, deep, lot of moving parts to it, but each operates as a separate company. So the private equity needs a very consolidated view of the data across the board. So how are you going to bring all of those things into a centralized manner, create operational dashboards, and maybe even predict, the occupancy rates, when is a particular room, right, or a, a senior member basically going to move on to an assisted care facility. So you can actually predict based on the faults or incidences they have, to a certain degree of accuracy, that your occupancy will be at this percentage. So you need to step up some of this lead gen sales activity to keep your occupancy as is. So we built a system like that, and we have a couple of custom portals that basically syndicate the insights to different users in a very controlled manner. It's all in Azure, SSRS, SSIS, Power BI type visualization. So it's a pretty central use case that we see with most organizations today. A more advanced would be where you're taking a data that is a byproduct of your core offering, right? And you're creating a new revenue stream. So this is a financial transaction intermediary. They sell, basically, they service alcohol transactions between different companies. So they've got at least about a couple of billion lines of unstructured invoice line items that come in. We take that, we classify that, and basically create perspectives, right, of how much beer is consumed in which zip code and what type of craft beer and so on, and how does that compete with wine, and what is the sensitivity of one over the other. Those type of insights get generated here, which actually people are willing to pay for, and pay for in pretty big numbers actually. So that turns into a revenue stream. So it's a company that's doing something in the marketplace, that's producing the data, but we are taking the data and basically creating a new revenue stream. So that's on the far end of the spectrum, where you're taking your data and essentially creating a new revenue stream. And the first example was on the left side of the spectrum, where it's a central case, you're creating reports and creating an operational system, a system of insight that drives your operation. So those were the two case studies, but if you look at a modern enterprise data strategy, these are some of the things that we work with today. We do quite a bit of machine learning, predictive modeling, that type of work, but also Azure, Amazon Web Services. We do quite a bit of cloud orchestration, take all data in the cloud in a secured manner and kind of bring it all together. Bolt on Power BI, Tableau, Sisense, Click, some of those. And more advanced customers are exploring Cloudera, TensorFlow. These are a couple of customers that we're doing some of the work for. But that's all sort of rooted in that type of a modern strategy that, these are things that could plug and play inside of those based on how your business models pivot and change due to digital and all of the technology that's disrupting existing business models. So we've looked at a formal approach, but basically in terms of these sub items, some of the challenges, how you develop these components, some conceptual thought frameworks, and a generic modern data analytics footprint, and some of the case studies. So we can now go into some of the questions. I could probably start with, before I go there, some of the questions. Any questions anybody has, they can type it in into the interface. Let me pause here. There's a few that has come in through email prior, and we'll take a couple of those. So for example, how do you effectively communicate and justify a collection of data that seemingly has no current business purpose and will likely look like an unnecessary data grab by customers? So few of the large companies actually have a line item on their balance sheet, right? That's kind of how they value data today. It's the quality of data, the depth, and the width of the data that gets valued squarely in financial terms, right? And it is even captured on the balance sheet. So that's on one end of the spectrum. So no data is considered unnecessary or excess. The more, the better. And especially if you can understand the lineage and the quality of the data and the continuity of that, that's all the more better. So that is one aspect of it, is identifying that type of data and kind of collecting it. Now, making a business case for that, right? You may make some of those today, and some you might not be able to rationalize today. But my first reaction to the question is, no data is always collect everything possible, right? Technology is cheap; it can store today, and you don't have to worry about volumes or things like that. So let's get that out of the way. But as far as making use case, right, that is meaningful to customers, you want to pick. There is a lot of things around data and ethics and how you use that data, because systems that are very intelligent like AI can introduce a lot of bias in unintended manner. So that is something to keep in mind. But taking a very narrow use case and then basically understanding the value to the end user and going in small incremental steps, that essentially would be one way of doing it. More specific examples, we hope to have some of those here in the next few webinars. We would be talking about, we intend to talk about a set of ideas or best practices or stellar use of data in the marketplace, right, that we've come across, and probably look at it in terms of, say, 10 such ideas, that type of thing. Stay tuned for that. For first part two, questions, is there a core set of data we should be collecting? So one of the things we do is an inventory activity, right? So we go around, understand data sitting in databases, systems, third-party systems that are not within the control of IT sometimes. All of these have a lot of disparate data, right? And you have to view them as data sources that's critical to your organization. So bringing it all into a consistent sort of a data store for further analysis, that's kind of a pretty important step in this whole process. So you have to start somewhere, but when you start it, right, so you don't really go you do identify everything, but you don't actually bring it all at the same time into a store. You start with a very simple business case that may point you to one system that has the data, and you bring that in and you kind of create that insight. And then you bring that into a and complete that full cycle of business value. Then you go on and do those cycles multiple times to bring other sources into the same system. So that way you're starting small and you're kind of delivering that business value, and you're doing in incremental cycles that keeps your costs low, but you do so on an infrastructure that can scale, right? An architecture that can scale into the future. So you're not having to reinvent your systems and integrations every single time. You can reuse that for multiple systems. Sometimes you may have to write, but at least your target platform is consistent and can house all of the varying types of data you will collect in future. So that's all we had from a time standpoint today. Let's see here. There are a few more questions coming in. We will provide answers to that in subsequent conversations, and maybe uh, you know an extended recording of that. But so we want to bring this webinar to a close today. Thank you for your time. We would love to have some feedback from a value standpoint, and from just the notion of knowledge that was shared, how it was perceived and the value to your own organizations. We'll be sending out a quick survey and request your response to that. Thanks, and happy holidays to all of you.